The wind carried the smell of dust and livestock across the Texas auction yard as Samuel Burke stepped through the wooden gate. His boots were worn thin, his coat faded, but it wasn't poverty that weighed on him. It was the silence of his home. His children rarely laughed anymore. They needed warmth again. He had come with only $50, clutching it like a man holding his last breath. He told himself he would buy a cow, maybe a mule, anything to keep his ranch alive another month. But beneath that practical hope was a deeper one he barely admitted. His kids needed a mother's presence. Voices rose from the far side of the yard, rough and sharp. Samuel followed them, expecting livestock pens. Instead, he froze at the sight before him. 3 women stood on a small platform, wrists tied with coarse rope, dust streaking their faces. They were exhausted, bruised, defeated, but alive. The auctioneer barked out prices as if selling sacks of grain. Men shouted bids casually, laughing among themselves. Samuel's stomach clenched. Slavery had been outlawed, yet here it was alive under a different name. Hidden behind words like labor, contracts, and indenture, the cruelty was the same, no matter the disguise. One woman, tall and sharp-eyed despite her fear, caught Samuel's gaze for a moment. It wasn't a plea she offered. It was defiance, quiet but still burning. The second woman trembled so violently she could barely stand, while the third held herself like someone protecting a wound too deep for words. Samuel felt a pull in his chest. He didn't believe in owning people, never had, but walking away felt like standing by while a barn burned. These women were trapped between monsters, and he had stumbled right into the middle of it. His fingers tightened around the thin roll of bills in his pocket. $50. Not enough for justice, but maybe enough for mercy. The bidding continued, louder now. A rancher with mean eyes raised the price, smirking as he looked them over. Samuel felt sick. He stepped forward before he could talk himself out of it. "I'll take all 3, he said, voice steady but firm. The crowd went quiet for a breath. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. "All 3? With what money?" the auctioneer laughed. Samuel lifted the envelope. $50 cash. The men around him erupted in mocking whistles and disbelief. But $50 was still $50, and these women had been standing there for hours with no real interest. Money spoke louder than laughter. The auctioneer scowled but finally nodded. "Sold?" He shoved the women forward like livestock. Samuel caught the youngest woman before she stumbled. Her skin was cold, her breath ragged. She looked at him as if unsure whether to fear him or thank him. He felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper onto his shoulders. He led them away from the platform. Ignoring the jeers tossed at his back once they were far enough from the crowd, he stopped near the shade of the feed barn. The women stood silently, the ropes still cutting into their wrists. Samuel pulled out his pocket knife and raised it carefully. "You're free now," he said. He cut the ropes one by one. The first woman rubbed her wrists but kept her chin high, suspicion and strength mingling in her eyes. The second woman sagged with exhaustion, tears forming but not falling. The third simply stared at the ground, as if waiting for pain that no longer came. Samuel took a step back. "I bought you because no one should be treated like that," he said quietly. "Not because I want anything from you." The women exchanged looks, disbelief flickering between them. Freedom wasn't something they'd been offered in a long time. It sounded fragile, like a bird afraid to fly even with the cage open. A wagon rattled nearby, but Samuel didn't move. He let them breathe. The world felt bigger now, the air heavier with choices they weren't sure how to make. Finally, the tall woman spoke. "What do you expect us to do?" she asked softly. Samuel shook his head. "Whatever you choose. My place is open if you need somewhere safe." The sun beat down on all of them, but Samuel felt something shift unexpected and quiet. He had come looking for livestock, for survival, for something to pull his ranch through another season. Instead, he had stepped into someone else's storm. Whether it was fate or foolishness, he didn't yet know. But he didn't regret it. Because sometimes a man didn't save lives with bullets or courage. Sometimes he saved them with $50. And the belief that no human being should ever stand alone in chains. The ranch was quiet when Samuel brought the three women home. Evening light stretched across the yard, touching the broken fence, the sagging roof, and the small porch where his children waited. When the women saw the shy little faces peeking through the doorway, something softened in all three of them at once. Samuel cut their ropes quickly, dropping the frayed strands into the dust. He stepped back to give them space. "You're free now," he said again, making sure the words were clear. "You can leave this place anytime. No one will stop you." The women didn't move. Freedom was strange when given instead of stolen. The children stepped out, hesitant but curious. The oldest girl held her younger brother's hand, studying the women with wide brown eyes. Samuel expected the women to turn away. Instead, the trembling woman, the softest of the three, knelt down and brushed the child's cheek gently, as if remembering a tenderness she thought she'd lost forever. They stayed for supper. Samuel cooked awkwardly, burning half the meal, but the women didn't laugh. They ate quietly, grateful for warmth and safety. After the children fell asleep, the tall woman looked around the cabin, noticing the patched walls, the empty shelves, the exhaustion in Samuel's shoulders. "You're alone," she said softly. He nodded. The youngest woman, barely more than a girl, touched a blanket the children slept under. It was torn at the edges, worn thin. "They need help," she whispered. Samuel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over the cabin, in every crack and every silence. The women exchanged glances. None of them got up to leave. Morning came with a new rhythm. While Samuel fed the horses, the tall woman began sweeping the yard, pushing dust into neat lines. The trembling woman cooked breakfast, though her hands shook at first. The youngest braided the little girl's hair while the boy played at her feet. Samuel stood by the barn, watching the scene unfold like a blessing. Days passed, then weeks. Their presence filled the ranch with life again. The tall woman repaired clothes with skillful, patient hands. The second woman sang softly while cooking, her voice trembling like a memory coming back to life. The youngest chased after the children with laughter that felt like sunshine on a cold day. Samuel didn't treat them as servants. He couldn't. They were too proud, too strong, too deeply wounded to be claimed by anyone. He paid them for their work with what little he had: food, shelter, safety, and he listened when they spoke, even when their stories were hard to hear. Trust grew slowly, like grass after drought. Storms rolled across the plains one night, pounding the cabin with wind that howled through every crack. The children clung to the youngest woman, frightened by thunder. She held them close, whispering a lullaby from her childhood. The tall woman kept the fire burning while Samuel and the second woman patched the roof with buckets and blankets. It was the first night they all felt like a single unit, fighting the same storm together. Weeks blended into months. Samuel noticed small changes: laughter returning to his children, courage returning to the trembling woman, confidence returning to the youngest. After years of living under cruelty, they stood straighter, breathed easier, spoke louder. Their past didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. One afternoon, Samuel found the tall woman teaching his daughter to sew. The child's tiny fingers fumbled with the needle, but the woman guided her patiently. "You're doing fine," she said gently. Samuel felt something warm in his chest, something he hadn't felt since his wife died. It wasn't love yet, but it was hope. He found the second woman tending the garden with steady hands. Her trembling had faded. She hummed while watering the rose she'd planted herself. She caught him watching and gave a timid smile. He realized then she hadn't smiled in years. Now she had a place where no one raised a hand against her. The youngest woman spent most of her time with the children, running through fields, helping with chores, teaching them songs from her homeland. One evening she sat on the porch with Samuel, watching the sunset paint the sky gold. "We were slaves," she murmured. "Until you gave us a life." Samuel didn't know how to answer. He'd bought them to save them, but they had saved his children first, then his ranch, and finally the hollowed-out pieces of himself he'd forgotten existed. Freedom given freely had returned to him in ways he never expected. The women had become the heartbeat of his home. The ranch flourished under their care. The fences stood strong again, the horses healthier, the meals warm, the nights peaceful. The cabin felt fuller, richer, alive. Samuel found himself smiling more. The children clung to the women with trust that came as natural as breathing. One night, as the fire crackled softly, the youngest woman placed a hand on Samuel's arm. "You didn't rescue 3 women," she said. "You rescued a future." He looked at the 3 of them sitting around the hearth, 3 women who had known pain, fear, and chains, now laughing softly with his children. He realized she was right. He hadn't just changed their lives, they had rebuilt his. They had taken a broken ranch, a grieving father, and 2 lonely children and turned it all into something strong and warm and whole. A family born not from blood, but from mercy, healing, and choices made with courage. Samuel Burke had spent $50 to save lives, but what he received was priceless.